And this is why I don't join writing groups, because you guys scare me. Speaking of things going poorly in America, but are actually reflective of the systems that we live in, I'm so sorry that my video is yet again another author controversy. A new author has come under fire for allegedly faking their race. Now, I say allegedly because I'm not ready to cross that off my bingo chart just yet. This situation is a little bit more tricky to discern, especially because when it comes to proving someone's indigenous identity, it can get very fuzzy for a variety of reasons that we will get into. I'm going to be talking about an author named Colby Wilkens. She has recently been called out by an organization that was formed to point out any fraudulent behavior of a person posing as Native American. However, that organization seems to be very iffy according to other indigenous people. But what still makes it not so great for this author is that other indigenous people have pointed out some of the inconsistencies with the ways that she has portrayed herself. And other writers have also talked about her behavior that seemed to be bullying them, including authors of color. So it's just not a great time for her at the moment. But the one good thing that any quote-unquote canceled author can depend on is that it doesn't really matter if people are frowning upon you. You will still have your book in the bestsellers list anyway. I'm gonna dive into all these details, but first let me talk to you about the author, Colby Wilkens, and just introduce her a little bit. So she writes young adult and adult, particularly for romance and horror. And the biography that I gleaned from Google that is no longer there on her website, but to give you context for what her biography originally said on Google was, Colby Wilkens is a queer, white, and Choctaw Cherokee author with a heart for adventure. When she's not traveling, she can be found in the Pacific Northwest on unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples with her partner, 2 cats, and a vast collection of books and candles. So she recently published a book called If I Stopped Haunting You that came out towards the late end of October. This is part of a 3-book deal. When this was announced, it was said that she got a good deal, and that could range from $100,000 to $250,000. We don't know how much she actually got paid, but in one of the articles that I'm gonna link in my description, I feel like the headline jumps on the clickbaity part, which is that up to $249,000 she got paid for this. We don't know if that's true, and I also don't know if it's really relevant to talk about how much she got paid. Even for a 6-figure book deal, taxes and the agent you have and so many other things take away so much from it that you can't really live off of it anyway. However, many other authors make way less than that, so I can understand their frustration. But I think the salt in the wound is the fact that these novels specifically focus on indigenous characters and culture. So the first one, If I Stopped Haunting You, features an indigenous character who flirts with a female Native American writer at a haunted Scottish castle. So this features Native themes, and Amazon marked it as an editor's choice for romance. So she already has a lot of good things set up for her, and if it weren't for this controversy, that's a great thing. More indigenous authors should be under the spotlight, and it seems to be very overt in the sense that in this particular book, you're reading about these 2 indigenous authors in the story where they get into an argument on a panel at a book convention about indigenous representation in publishing. Her next book is supposed to come out in 2025. It's called If I Dig You, and this is about hunting for lost Cherokee gold. Now, this might have been pulled now that there has been controversy, so it might not even be released in 2025 anymore. But don't worry, a person of color will still profit off of this foolishness, because in place of that, I will be hunting for American money. Thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Burga. What's unique about them is that they launched designs based on fashion trends, so they are both stylish and protective and durable. Even if you don't take my word for it, there are real celebrities that are way more famous than me that are wearing these products, like Taylor Swift, Lucy Hale, Cara Delevingne. I was able to get 2 laptop cases. This is the main one that you're looking at right now. The other one is a cute flowery design that I'm going to be keeping as my backup. But what I was really excited to order were the phone cases for my partner. There's 2 types of phone cases that you can get. One is the Elite type. They have shock absorption, which absorbs up to 90% of impact force. So now next time Victoria drops her phone, she's not gonna have to worry as much. The second type of phone cases they have are called Tough. I noticed it still has the raised bezel for screen protection, which is really nice. And they're really comfortable to hold because they feel so slim. If you want to try it out, I have a 2+2 offer, which means that you can buy 4 phone cases for the price of 2 phone cases. This is a friends and family offer, so that means you can buy it not just for yourself, but as gifts for your loved ones. In my case, it was for my partner. You can use my link at burga.social/CindyPX15 and get an extra 15% off using my code CindyPX15. So thank you again to Burga for sponsoring, and now let's get back to the video. So let's dive into the catalyst for how this controversy even happened in the first place, because up until this point, it seemed like this author was very clearly and loudly a representation of Indigenous culture, from the way that she was marketing it, from the way that she was writing it, from her biography to everything like that, until a nonprofit organization published a statement calling her out on that. This is the Tribal Alliance Against Frauds, which is a nonprofit based in the US that is dedicated to exposing people and organizations that have falsely claimed to be American Indian. I do want to note that they are not a tribal program and they are not endorsed by any other tribe. I'll share some different opinions about the validity of this organization in a little bit, but first I want to point out the report that they had published in the first place. Basically, they claimed this author has no links to any Indigenous people based upon research by their genealogist into her family line. I'm gonna link the report in my description, but they pull up all these documents of her ancestors and they go back 10 generations. So the co-founder and director of this nonprofit, who herself is Cherokee, says, "We found this person has no American Indian ancestry. There were multiple complaints about this person. Lots of people have suspected for some time." So according to their investigation, they're claiming that Wilkens made a mistake when she was putting together her family tree because she based her Indigenous identity around a man in her family tree named William Henry Adams. This was her great-great-great-grandfather. They found that this name was registered on the Cherokee DAS roll in 1898, and this basically lists everyone who would be acceptable as eligible for tribal membership as Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, or Seminole Native. But the researchers found that there were 2 men with this name, one who was a white settler and one who was Indigenous. And what their claim in the investigation is that Wilkens is related to the non-Indigenous William Henry Adams. Basically, Wilkens wrote back on Twitter that she had an ancestor that was born in 1888. That would have been a man named Jack Alfred Adams, who is the son of William Henry Adams. But when they looked into it, the William Henry Adams that is Cherokee would have been less than a year old in 1888. So that would have made it impossible for him to father a child. They also looked into the Choctaw side of Wilkens' family tree. According to their investigation, they found Wilkens' great-great-grandfather, Jack Adams, married Annie Lee Frances Taylor in 1909 in Oklahoma. That location is within the Choctaw Nation, but the records that they looked up for Annie show that she was born in Stephenville, Texas, which is a town located very far away from any reservation and doesn't have any connection to Native people. So essentially, they concluded that her family were white settlers and they don't have any actual connection with Indigenous people. Something to note in an article that I found is that several years ago, David Cornsilk, who is a professional genealogist and managing editor of the Cherokee Observer, commented on a Facebook post that Wilkens made about her Cherokee and Choctaw ancestry. And he wrote, "Since you are making money marketing your writing as a Native American, it seems you would want to find out for sure. I would like to invite you to join our free research group, and our team of genealogists and historians will find out the truth for you. You owe honesty and transparency to your readers. I hope you would take the high road in this matter." All of that, it just does not look very good for her. As a result, she ended up making a statement on her website and Instagram. "I have only ever created stories that are authentic to me and my life experiences. I am not enrolled. I have never claimed to be enrolled or to represent the viewpoint of an enrolled tribal member as reflected in my stories and statements. I've grown up with family and in a home that shared this experience, which goes back to my great-grandfather and extended family and has been part of our culture and identity. I've always been transparent about my identity and our struggle to gather the paperwork necessary to enroll because of bad record keeping and missing and inaccurate documentation. This is not unheard of and is a difficult part of forming family histories. I am working hard alongside my family to find more documentation, which takes time, but until I can prove my ties beyond a shadow of a doubt and in alignment with the Cherokee Nation statement on sovereignty and identity, I will no longer be writing Native stories. My team and I have decided to pull If I Dig You from publication until further notice, and If I Stopped Haunting You will be my last Native story. Thank you for your patience as we to work through this. She also took out mentions of being Choctaw and Cherokee away from her bio, but also took out the white part too, which I guess now that I think about it, a white author never puts that they're white in their bio because that's almost like a badge of shame at this point. So that's pretty much gone. And then later on, she ended up just deleting her Twitter profile entirely. She also privated her Instagram after posting that statement. So while she's taking some time to do some deeper investigation to make sure she is truly what she had claimed to be, her book did end up hitting the bestseller list. I think it was a combination of the book kind of being buzzy to begin with and how you don't really see many Indigenous books in mainstream publishing, and due to November being National Native American Heritage Month, it was kind of like the prime time for her book to do really well. So she did end up being on a bestseller, but I don't really know if this is a direct result after the controversy or if it just happened from pre-orders, because that's really how a book can make it to the first week that it gets released. So I think because of all of that promotional stuff, it was guaranteed for her to be on the bestsellers list anyway. I would be curious to see if that changes at all in the next few weeks, or if maybe people just don't know about what's going on. But now I want to focus on some of the problematic aspects of this organization that I called her out in the first place. So like I mentioned, this nonprofit has no Indigenous nation or tribe that has endorsed their work officially. There are a couple of tweets that pointed this out when the report first came out, saying they are not authorized by any tribal government and it's racist, transphobic, and otherwise fraudulent. Their documentation is often fraudulent and misleading. I also found some other tweets by Native people that were calling out this organization. What I have learned just looking into this nonprofit is that they also do not have certified genealogists either. People also have a problem with the way that they validate someone's identity through blood quantum rather than tribal membership, because it's not really about the percentage of Native American blood that you have in you. It's more about if you're a registered member of the tribe. Have you participated in ceremonies or traditions? Focusing on blood quantum doesn't really make sense when so many Indigenous people have been killed off. They're not like a static group of people, and it matters way more about tribal involvement. Genealogy is also complicated because it's not an exact science. It's extremely easy to fill in the wrong information in your family tree or just not have any records in general because these things have gotten lost in history. You could even argue that blood quantum is following genocidal strategies because it's not prioritizing things like community or culture or language or family. That's why I personally am not going to take this statement from this nonprofit to be the end all be all for this person's identity. But what I did find to be interesting was the responses from Indigenous authors and activists who are very understandably upset by this. In particular, there is AJ Eversole, who is a Cherokee author and journalist, and they shared extensive resources on Twitter. I can't speak for anything except Cherokee, but Cherokee people are very clear about what it means if someone publicly claims a Cherokee identity openly. We have a whole statement on Cherokee sovereignty and identity, which I've linked below. What I found interesting about this statement is that the Cherokee Nation specifically state that Cherokee identity is not something that you can claim based on your heritage or ancestry unless you have official recognition from one of the 3 federally recognized bands of the Cherokee. It is a political identity that can only be established through documentation. So if you don't have documentation, you cannot claim to be Cherokee. There are 2 points with this document that I feel like contradict both what the nonprofit was trying to do and what Colby Wilkens was trying to do. The first one says, no individual or collectivity should claim a Cherokee identity on the basis of genetic testing, phenotype, family stories, inherited cultural practices, sentiments, or feelings of affinity, or any other spurious criteria. So this pretty much knocks out the family tree that the nonprofit was looking into. But then the other point knocks out what Colby Wilkens was trying to do, because it says any person who publicly identifies as Cherokee has initiated a public discussion about their identity. It is appropriate to ask such persons to explain the verifiable basis upon which they are claiming a Cherokee identity. If they cannot substantiate that they are a Cherokee citizen, they should be clearly and directly asked to cease identifying as Cherokee. There's also a great resource for agents and editors who might be evaluating stories by authors that say they are Native American or they are writing stories about being Native American. These are guidelines that encourage people to ask questions like, what tribe do you associate yourself with? Is this tribe state or federally recognized? How are you involved with this tribe? Even if you were to have an enrollment number, how are you exemplifying that this is like a way of life? How do you give back to your tribe and your family? How are you involved in this community? Did you grow up up in the community that you're writing about? Have you talked to or interviewed other people in that tribe? What resources have you used to inform the work that you're writing? I also want to share some other perspectives from Indigenous and minority authors that have just been really hurt by the situation that has happened with this author. There's a Cherokee author named Rebecca who has just rejected Colby's statement on Instagram. I believe what I was told is not a valid excuse for falsely claiming Cherokee identity in the year of our Lord 2024. It is well known that many white families pass down fabricated stories of Cherokee ancestor. Running down the validity of those stories, with the exception of relatives who were adopted out, is 100% doable because Cherokees are up there with royalty and Mormons with how well we can trace our families. Cherokees have also been asking for folks to stop repeating these stories without evidence for decades. It seems that Colby has had knowledge about these requirements as well based on her old tweets back in 2023. She talks about finding the birth year of her ancestor, but she's unable to track down his date of death. It seemed like she went through a very exhausting process of trying to locate birth and death certificates for 5 generations. So she knew that these were a requirement and she had been on the hunt for a while. And I think because of like all these past tweets and the way that she marketed and leaned so heavily into being Native American, I kind of wonder if she genuinely did believe that she is Native American. And maybe she was struggling with not feeling valid because it was so hard to find the proper paperwork to prove it. But I think her mistake is chasing down this rabbit hole, but not actually participating in the culture. Like, regardless of what the family tree is gonna look like, it doesn't appear that she was following the statement that the Cherokee Nation had put out. And regardless of blood quantum, she wasn't participating in the culture. She has only ever said that her family has history, but nowhere in any of these tweets or public statements or anything has she ever admitted to participating in any holidays or language or tribal events and associations. So it's not really a matter of how much Native American blood you have, it's about connection and community. And that is what she seemed to be lacking in. This is something that her peers started to realize now that we're talking about what makes a person Native. There are some people who have been in her circles or in her Discord chats with other writers where her behavior was not very consistent with the values or identity that she was preaching. I want to talk a little bit about the behavior later, but in terms of just being affiliated with a tribe or the culture, I did get permission to share this screenshot from someone that says, I've been in a Discord with her since summer 2022. She built her entire identity and marketing around being Native, and she's not really affiliated with her tribe or the culture as far as I know. I thought she was, but apparently she just found a relative a few generations back that was Native and claimed the identity. Now, I think what's interesting is that if you look at some of the excerpts of the book that she published this year, where it follows Native American writers, you can really see this mirrored reflection of how a writer feels less validated because she cannot prove that she is Native, as kind of a platform for her to echo her insecurities about that. And I think because of how tightly she clung onto those things, made it more obvious how truly insecure she felt about it. I want to share this other post that was written by a Native reader. I hesitate to say that this is a review. It's more so a very quick skimming that this person did of this book. Basically, this person decided to search up some common buzzwords in their library copy of the book just to see if any of the representation was off. And they share their thoughts in a Tumblr post that I will link below. Again, I don't think we should take one person's opinion as the end all be all, because obviously marginalized groups will have different opinions about the same book, even if that book is written by a marginalized person themselves. But I do think it's worth looking at just to share additional thoughts from Native people and more insights, especially when we can finally see some of the excerpts. So one of the things that this person pointed out was that in this book, it is mentioned that the main character couldn't even slip out a Cherokee tribal identification card to prove her nativeness, which again kind of goes against the Cherokee statement that I had just read earlier. And even this person on Tumblr is saying, why is this character not enrolled? Because that is literally a requirement of Cherokee Nation. You cannot claim that you are Cherokee if you are not enrolled. So obviously the character here was not able to enroll for whatever reason, but it doesn't seem like it answers any questions for why they are distanced from their Cherokee family, why they couldn't get the paperwork when it is something that is more easily documented than other nations. natives. And Colby Wilkens does seem to be very aware of this because she has defended it constantly. Back in 2022, she said, a reminder that just because someone isn't registered with a tribe doesn't mean they aren't native. Getting registered is extremely difficult and often impossible. Not being registered or being registered with a non-federally recognized tribe doesn't make you any less native. You can't register with a tribe with a family tree. You need several pieces of documentation, which are often impossible to find or get access to. Historical records are inherently colonial. Censuses were often done through churches, and when they were done, natives often didn't want to provide that information. Some tribes weren't recognized and some still aren't. I can understand the frustration of not being able to get the documentation you need to prove that you're Cherokee, but in the context of this specific nation, it is an extremely touchy issue for them to the point where they absolutely require you to do it. It doesn't sound like this is a gray area that you have leeway in, regardless of what you are told from your family. There's a few other things a Tumblr user points out, like how the term death box is used as a reference to some childhood memory that the main character had, but this person, along with 7 other Cherokee people that they asked, have no idea what it means, nor does Google know what it means. The characters' last names are Storm and Skinner, and this person felt like those were very superficial native coded names. And then lastly, they highlight this one scene between the characters where the main character, who struggles with not feeling native enough because she's white passing, says, I wonder if the only reason I ever hated you was because I didn't think I was enough. By tearing you down, it made me feel ... The main guy replies, stronger, and she replies, it's silly, isn't it, that tearing down another native author made me feel whole. He replies, no, not that surprising. By limiting the number of native books being published, we've been pitted against each other since the beginning. She says, fuck the colonizers, and then he echoes, fuck the colonizers. Penn never apologizes for these feelings. They just get validated. I would say that is a messy thought worth exploring if the character changes, but she doesn't. She stays toxic and beats poor Neil into submission. If you ask me, the author is projecting her own struggles. I think I can understand what Colby was trying to go for with this kind of story, because it definitely is reflecting her own insecurities with being a Native American enough. But what's really difficult about this situation is that since she doesn't have the paperwork or enrollment to validate that she is Cherokee, you could argue that she might be perpetuating the issues that Cherokee people face, which is that when people claim to have Native ancestry without backing it up, they're also taking attention and jobs and money away from Native voices. What does it mean when there is a bestseller, buzzworthy book about Native Americans written by someone who doesn't have the enrollment to prove that she is Native American? Especially considering the fact that Indigenous peoples are already so underrepresented in every industry. And we're talking about publishing specifically, fewer than 2.5% of children's and young adult books were published by or about Native peoples in 2023, according to the Cooperative Children's Book Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So that means that the very few books that we do have that represent Native Americans have an extremely magnified, bigger influence with how other people perceive natives. And then for the writer side of things, I can only imagine how much more confusing and difficult it would be for a person of color who is white passing to try to navigate publishing and writing a book about their culture, but they are seen as white. When an incident like this happens, there's that fear of being like the next Colby Wilkens or having your own identity be questioned. That's certainly the case for this thread by Erin Baldwin, who is a white presenting biracial Filipino author. And what I thought was interesting was that this person says, I was not aware this author was raised outside of the culture she claimed. I was not aware that she discovered it later in life and decided to claim it then, according to several personal friends of hers, so take that with a grain of salt. So this is where I'm gonna dive into kind of like the open secret that writers are talking about when it comes to Colby Wilkens, because not only are people talking about how she has been claiming this identity much later on in life without participating in the culture, they're also talking about her behavior and attitude towards other authors of color in general. So that paints the situation in another light, where I think you could claim ignorance and making a genuine mistake, but then it's another thing when you have not been treating people very kindly. A Chickasaw author says, I never spoke out about Colby Wilkens after I blocked her for being an all-around awful person to me and other authors of color. I never did because she had a huge platform and would cry lateral violence and it would give her a boost. Now her fake Native book is a bestseller. She has huge marketing and bookseller support for Native November. She is not Native and will never be Native. It's just more of the same, like with Yellowstone, etc. White audiences want Natives only if written by and performed by white people. Another author replied, she literally blocked me everywhere and called me a bully because I called her out on it too. Complained about people writing books in the Pacific Northwest was when they didn't know the weather, but wrote a full book in Scotland, where I'm from, when she visited once as a tourist like 5 years ago. Another person wrote, I haven't heard one good thing about her, like she seems like a genuinely cruel person on top of everything. Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of folks share their horrible experiences with her. I've since pulled her book. I don't put any merit into TAAF, but I do trust neutrals and their personal interactions. Nobody wants to start the discourse because they're afraid of speaking up about a fellow author / friend who has not been shy about tearing people down that they disagree with. Maybe we should be a little more publicly critical of someone who is releasing a book about finding lost Cherokee gold without the express support of the people she claims to represent, who has bullied and trashed other Native public figures, according to sources I trust. TBH, if Colby Wilkens is what she claims, that makes the multiple reports on here and threads of her attacking, manipulating, bullying, and kicking out BIPOC of BIPOC spaces she oversaw and making other safe spaces she was invited into toxic is even more fucked up, actually. If she is what she says, I hope she finds the docs she's looking for and sues NY Post and TAAF for false claims. With that said, folks are coming forward with their stories of how she moved behind the scenes in the BIPOC community and the harm she caused. I'm also going to share some text from another writer who was in the same Discord as her. I'm not going to share any screenshots from the actual Discord because that's a private community, but I did get permission to share this text where this person says she was never happy for anyone and never had any real friendships. If you came into the chat with good news, she'd be like, congrats. And if it was a deal, she would say, congrats, how much was your deal for? If it was more than her deal, she would immediately comment on that. So I'm reading out loud all these screenshots to basically illustrate this picture that writers in the online community have been talking about the way that she behaves behind the scenes. And even I myself have heard very specific stories about the way that she would behave around other writers and around other writers of color. And this is coming from me, who isn't even involved in any writing group. So there's definitely been a whisper network going on of her behavior. And obviously I can't share these stories out of privacy for the people affected. But I think the general sentiment is just that she was a bully and she would talk shit about other people. And that's really what I'm latching onto here, because regardless of whether you are indigenous or not, or you genuinely made a mistake and you didn't know any better, I think harassing other people and just being mean should be unacceptable. And if anything, if she were truly indigenous, that almost makes it worse, because it goes to show how even if you are a person of color, if you are white passing, you still have so much privilege compared to other people who don't pass as well. You have more visibility, you have easier opportunities, you get more of an advantage because of colorism. You get to be kind of like the safe token diversity for an industry that says they value diversity and promoting authors of color, but they still want to play it safe by still promoting authors that look white and write certain stories that are palatable to a mainstream audience. And I also think it's worse for her to truly be indigenous, because that means if all of these stories about her being a bully to other people are true, then she was another person of color being cruel to other people in her community and other marginalized people. But just because you are a marginalized person doesn't mean that you win all of the arguments that you get into online. It doesn't mean that you can't be a shitty person. But I think a lot of bad actors who happen to be marginalized kind of use it as a shield to get away with bad behavior. And this isn't something that's like unusual or new. I'm aware of authors of color who treat other people, even in the same race as them, so poorly behind the scenes. And these are authors that you would not expect to have mean girl behavior, because their social platforms and the way that they behave in public give the veneer of being very socially conscious and having strong values and being supportive of other people, when that shit is just fake as hell. So with that logic, no wonder white people have in the past, and definitely in the future, see marginalized identities as a benefit to them. It gives them something to market around. It seemingly grants them protection when they're harassing other people because they think they can just pull the race card. That's the logic that people have in their brains, subconscious or not. And it's not just white people who believe that, but it's other shitty authors of color that think that way as well. And this is why I don't join writing groups, because you guys scare me. Like, damn, is it really that serious? I'm gonna end this video here. Basically, what I've concluded is that I don't know whether this person is indigenous or not. I feel like it doesn't even matter at that point, point, because where you should draw the line is her allegedly being cruel and mean to other people. Like, that should have been like red flag number one way before we get into like the race part. She could be Native American, but it doesn't even matter. Like, if you are not supportive of other people and you see other writers as competition and you get so caught up in who got a bigger publishing deal than you did, it's time to go back to the drawing board and reprioritize, because this ain't it. So I guess I will continue keeping to myself, and if any other similar scandals happen, I'll just look into it and continue reporting to you guys. The next video I will post will be on a much lighter note, where Elias and I will be reacting to 50 Shades of Grey. So hopefully there will be some levity on this very tough month to begin with. So until then, I will see you later. Bye.